there's two names for this phenomenon. One is called the hierarchy of therapeutics, this therapeutic ladder that you talked about. Another is maybe a more common or colloquial term called the therapeutic order. That is to say, the sequence of events that a doctor or a healthcare practitioner should approach a problem. I like to sometimes describe this as with a metaphor. And the metaphor is about the fly in the kitchen, right? So if a fly in your kitchen is a problem, if you see that as a problem, there's like a bunch of different potential solutions to that problem, right? One is to open up the door or the window, right, and see if you can like let the fly out, and that's a reasonably good solution. There's some risks to it. Maybe other flies would come in. It might not be the easiest. You might have to like navigate the fly out, out the door, but it's a pretty good solution in terms of its like invasiveness, right? It doesn't do a lot of damage to the fly or to the kitchen, as it were, right? And then up from there, we could go up to like the rolled up newspaper that you whack it with, or the fly swatter, and then we could go up from there to like Raid or some other toxic chemical that you spray in the air to try to kill the fly with. And then if none of those work, you could go up to the flamethrower, right? Like blasting the fly with the flamethrower. And the idea here is, this is a metaphor, right? Increasing levels of invasiveness, of toxicity, or of damage, right? The flamethrower will definitely get the job done, but it will do a lot of collateral damage in the process, right? And so here we are in a healthcare system where we pull out the freaking flamethrower like right away, many, many times. And that flamethrower can be a surgery, it could be a medication. It's just a higher order. It's not that the flamethrower, the bigger level interventions, the big guns, so to speak, are inappropriate. It's just that they're inappropriate when they are used before these safer, more gentle, more environmentally friendly options.
All right. Today I have with me Dr. Josh Levitt, a naturopathic physician with a degree in physiology from UCLA, a doctorate in naturopathic medicine from Bastyr University, residency training in integrative medicine, over 10 years of precepting medical residents from the Yale School of Medicine, and over 20 years of direct clinical experience with thousands of patients. Dr. Levitt, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thank you. It's good to be here. It's always awkward hearing myself described in that way, but it's all true. I promise it's all true.
Why do you think that is? Because I sort of get that feeling when I listen to other podcasts where, the guests are being introduced and they sort of like kind of cringe a little.
Yeah, it's always cringy, right? Maybe it's like, I don't know,
Yeah.
maybe it's the third person kind of effect, or also,
Yeah.
I don't know, I guess, really, to be honest, it's just, I don't know, that's sort of like ego stroking stuff, touting your
Sure.
credentials and your resume. And this medicine is more about like passion than ego for me. And I think that's what the cringiness comes from, it's just like hearing myself described in that way. It's always a little bit awkward, but hey, it's a necessary part of the game, I suppose.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. So before the interview, we actually talked about the first question I was going to ask anyway, which is very related to where naturopathy, where alternative medicine actually fits into healthcare in general. So to kind of preface this question, I'm a big fan of Dr. Andrew Huberman, as is like 99% of the population at this point.
Yeah.
And so one of the things he said really resonated with me in one of his interviews, which was that there seems to be this sort of levels of care, levels of, if somebody has some sort of issue, let's say it is depression, that we start with the lifestyle changes first and see if that doesn't get better. If it doesn't, then let's move on to targeted supplements and herbs and adaptogens maybe. And if that doesn't work, then finally, let's use the more aggressive prescription medications and things that are, much stronger than you would get from the lifestyle and the supplement side of things. But in my experience, it seems to be very common for pharmaceuticals to be prescribed before you deeply look into lifestyle. And so I was wondering what your thoughts were on sort of why did these first two levels sort of are sort of neglected, and why did naturopathy and therapies like naturopathy become labeled as sort of alternative medicine rather than like the preceding necessary parts before the actual conventional medicine comes in?
This is a fantastic question. A lot to unpack here, starting with Andrew Huberman himself, who I am also a huge fan of. The podcast is fantastic. And I grew up in Southern California, and I'm an old surfer and skateboarder, and he's a skateboarder too. I don't know if you knew that.
Yep, yeah,
And so like he has like, that's like the lesser known part of his kind of public persona. He's a Stanford educator, neuroscientist. He's got a great podcast. He skates. I love it. That's
yeah.
so very close to my heart. So, and it's also fantastic that people like him are out there kind of shining light on the issue that you just described. So, let me see where I can start here. There's a few different places to begin this conversation. So in naturopathic medicine, there's two names for this phenomenon. One is called the hierarchy of therapeutics, this therapeutic ladder that you talked about. Another is maybe a more common or colloquial term called the therapeutic order. That is to say, the sequence of events that a doctor or a healthcare practitioner should approach a problem. I like to sometimes describe this when I'm talking about this as with a metaphor. And the metaphor is about the fly in the kitchen, right? So if a fly in your kitchen is a problem, if you see that as a problem, there's like a bunch of different potential solutions to that problem, right? One is to open up the door or the window, right, and see if you can like let the fly out, and that's a reasonably good solution. There's some risks to it. Maybe other flies would come in. It might not be the easiest. You might have to like navigate the fly out, out the door, but it's a pretty good solution in terms of its like invasiveness, right? It doesn't do a lot of damage to the fly or to the kitchen, as it were, right? And then up from there, we could go up to like the rolled up newspaper that you whack it with, or the fly swatter, and then we could go up from there to like Raid or some other toxic chemical that you spray in the air to try to kill the fly with. And then if none of those work, you could go up to the flamethrower, right? Like blasting the fly with the flamethrower. And the idea here is, this is a metaphor, right? Increasing levels of invasiveness, of toxicity, or of damage, right? The flamethrower will definitely get the job done, but it will do a lot of collateral damage in the process, right? And so here we are in a healthcare system where we pull out the freaking flamethrower like right away, many, many times. And that flamethrower can be a surgery, it could be a medication. It's just a higher order. It's not that the flamethrower, the bigger level interventions, the big guns, so to speak, are inappropriate. It's just that they're inappropriate when they are used before these safer, more gentle, more environmentally friendly options. And so that's so I guess in one sense, I'm right on the same page with you. I think the question that you asked is like, how did we get here?
Sure.
Like how did
Yeah.
this happen? Like what, and there's a long history there. I mean, there was a time not that long ago when all medicine was natural medicine, right? Like antibiotics only came into widespread use in the 1940s, mid 1940s. So we're not talking, this better living through chemistry, modern surgical techniques, these are all new. And I think that the way we got here, to sum it up briefly, is that in America, we are in healthcare and in other industries are fascinated, almost seduced by the new. And so when new drugs, new surgical procedures, new stuff comes out, we just get really excited. And very often we will just then dump or get rid of or forget about all the stuff that was old. And there's another example of this. My kids are starting to collect vinyl records, right? So in music in America, right, you had like vinyl records and 8-track tapes, then cassette tapes, then CDs, and now solid state and streaming. And like with each new technology, out goes the old one, right? And then now we're starting to see vinyl records come back in the same way that we're starting to see natural medicine come back. And so I think it's just the seduction of the new, the sexy, the high tech, people love that. And then of course, all of that is bolstered by, and I don't want to do any big Western medicine bashing here, but all of it's bolstered by an industry that's worth trillions of dollars, that's incentivized to prescribe the drugs, to do the surgeries and all that sort of stuff. So that's that was a roundabout way of getting there. That's what I think is going on there.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And I think most people, and probably myself included, when I first sort of started to dig into health, will just say, well, it's entirely financial, and there's really no gain from conventional medicine, which I found to be totally false. So I do think that, yeah, at a certain point, if things don't work, you know, I'm very glad that we have things like antibiotics and surgeries. I mean, if I get into a car accident, I'm not going to go to, I apologize, I'm not going to go
Don't
to a
come to me, man.
naturopath.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not
Right.
going to go get ashwagandha. So,
Yeah. When your neck still hurts 6 months after the car accident, that's a different story.
there you go.
Right. Yeah.
There you
Can
go.
I tell you a
Yeah,
story? Can I tell you a story real quick?
sure. Yeah.
So this is I guess what you might call an origin story. So like we said in my cringy bio in the beginning, I went to UCLA as an undergrad, and I was one of those kids that just always wanted to be a doctor, right? That was like my thing. Always knew that. But because my father was training medical residents at UCLA at the time, I had kind of like, I don't know, backstage access to a lot of doctors at UCLA back in the day, and they were all telling me, this is like more than 25 years ago now, that being a doctor basically ain't what it used to be, right? There's all these new pressures from insurance companies and whatnot, and they were strongly discouraging me away from a career in medicine. So I kind of took that to heart at that time in my last year of college there, and decided to go travel the world instead of go to medical school, because I kind of wanted to just sort of see what else was out there. And on that trip, which was backpacking and sleeping on beaches and hitchhiking and, that kind of thing, I did it for a year. I was on an airplane heading in towards Europe at one point, and I had developed an infection on the back of my heel from my hygiene wasn't good at the time. I wasn't taking lots of showers. Anyway, this blister turned into cellulitis, which you probably know what that is. It's a severe, like limb or even life-threatening infection, right? So climbing up my leg, it's really bad. I got a fever. My leg is hurting terribly. It's a bad situation. And I land in Switzerland, which is where I was headed. I called back home. I was able to negotiate getting a prescription for antibiotics, called in to a pharmacy in Switzerland, which I hobbled my way there. And when I got into that pharmacy, I picked up my prescription. It was for Keflex, cephalosporin antibiotic, which, by the way, cured the infection. So that's great. It took a few days, but it got better. But in that Swiss pharmacy, remember, I'm coming from Southern California. There's all this stuff, right? Herbs, homeopathic medicines, like all this natural medicine stuff in the pharmacy, right? Because in Europe, in contrast to in America, they keep the 8 tracks and the vinyl records on the shelf, right? They were still into it. It still works. German doctors, Swiss doctors, Italian doctors routinely prescribe herbal and natural vitamins, minerals, and whatnot first. So I get to this pharmacy, I pick up my antibiotics, but I'm also exposed to this whole new world. And that world became so fascinating to me at the time. I knew nothing of it. And it became, well, here I am 25 years later, still equally passionate, maybe even more about this. And so it's interesting what you say. The reason why you reminded me to tell that story is that I'm a naturopathic doctor, but I got my start in this field on a day where I needed antibiotics, right? So like, it's like a weird irony, right? Like the cellulitis and the necessity for the life